A family's winter getaway to a remote cabin turns into a harrowing fight for survival as they face dwindling supplies, relentless snow, and a growing sense that their isolation may have been orchestrated. Suspicion, fear, and strange occurrences unravel their sanity, leaving them trapped in a chilling mystery they may never escape. I never really believed those survival stories you hear about on TV. You know, the ones where people get stuck in some impossible situation and have to fight tooth and nail just to make it out alive. That was all dramatic nonsense to me. Until last winter. That's when everything changed. It was supposed to be a quiet, cozy getaway. Sarah, my wife, found this cabin listed on some obscure website. It was tucked away in the mountains. The pictures made it look like a postcard, snow-covered trees, a little frozen lake out front, and miles from the chaos of city life. Exactly what we needed, she said. I agreed, reluctantly. Between work stress and Olivia's teenage mood swings, a week away sounded therapeutic. But if I'd known then what I know now, I'd have never stepped foot in that godforsaken place. We packed up the SUV with all the essentials, clothes, some books, games for Ethan, and enough food to last us for weeks just in case. Sarah's always been a planner like that. She'd survived some camping trip disaster when she was younger. She doesn't talk about it much, but it made her pretty meticulous about being prepared. I always teased her about it, but this time it felt like overkill. The cabin wasn't in the Arctic Circle, after all. The drive up was uneventful. Olivia had her earbuds in, pretending we didn't exist, while Ethan kept asking how much longer. Sarah navigated, her finger tracing the route on a printed map, a backup for when cell service inevitably cut out. The roads got narrower, the trees thicker, and then, finally, we pulled up to the cabin. It was perfect. For about 5 minutes. The first sign of trouble came when we started unloading. Sarah noticed the pantry wasn't stocked like the website had promised. Not a big deal, I said. We brought plenty. But then we found the fridge wasn't working either. And the heater. Barely a sputter of warmth. By the time the snowstorm rolled in that night, sealing us in like a tomb, we were already on edge. Days blurred together. The snow kept falling, piling up higher than I'd ever seen. At first we tried to make the best of it, board games by the fire, Ethan building forts out of couch cushions. But the cold started creeping in, not just into our bodies but into our minds. Olivia stopped talking to any of us altogether. Just sat by the window, staring at the endless white. Sarah's practicality turned into something sharper, almost frantic, as she rationed our food, her lips moving silently like she was doing calculations in her head. Then Ethan found the notebook. It was tucked under the couch cushions, old and battered, like it'd been there for years. At first, we thought it was some forgotten journal from a previous guest. But the notes, they were strange. Scribbled lines about controlled scarcity and psychological thresholds. There were diagrams of the cabin layout, lists of supplies, or rather, the lack of them. And at the bottom of one page, scrawled in thick, angry letters, "Do not trust them." "Who's them?" Ethan whispered, his wide eyes darting between me and Sarah. I told him it was nothing, probably just some prank. But Sarah's face said otherwise. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and she shoved the notebook into her bag like she didn't want Olivia to see it. Too late. Olivia had already caught a glimpse, and for the first time in days she spoke. "We're not getting out of here, are we?" she said flatly. No fear in her voice, just acceptance, like she'd already made peace with it. The rations dwindled faster than they should have. Sarah swore she'd packed more, but every time we opened the pantry, it felt emptier. I thought maybe the kids were sneaking snacks, but even Ethan's cheeks were hollowing out. Sarah started cutting portions, a practical side giving way to something colder. She would eat last, sometimes not at all. At night, I'd wake up to find her sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames like they were speaking to her. The worst part was the noise. Little creaks and thuds in the walls. At first, I chalked it up to the old cabin settling under the weight of the snow. But then Ethan said he saw something. A shadow, he called it. "It's not ours." I told him it was just his imagination, but the look in his eyes, he believed it. And a part of me started to, too. One morning, Sarah snapped. Olivia had been hoarding a handful of crackers she'd hidden in her jacket. When Sarah found out, she slapped the bag out of Olivia's hands, screaming about fairness and survival. Olivia just laughed. A cold, bitter laugh that didn't belong to a 16-year-old. "Why does it matter?" she said. We're all screwed anyway. That night, the power went out completely. No lights, no heater, just the darkness and the sound of our own breathing. And the walls. The creaking was louder now, more deliberate. Ethan wouldn't sleep, kept whispering about the shadow. Olivia was gone, mentally, if not physically. And Sarah, she wouldn't stop pacing, clutching that damn notebook like it held all the answers. We're still here, I think. I don't know. The days blend together, the snow never stops, and the food, there's none left. Sarah keeps saying help will come, but her voice has lost its conviction. Olivia spends her time outside now, barefoot in the snow, staring at the trees. She doesn't even shiver. Ethan, he's the only one who still talks to me, but he started asking questions I can't answer. Dad, he whispered last night, his voice barely audible over the wind. Do you think someone planned this? I don't know what to say, because deep down I think he might be right. A solo winter hikay discover a mysterious snow shelter during a storm, uncovering chilling evidence of human bone and barefoot track. As he flees, he realizes something unseen is following him, matching his every step, leaving him haunted by the unknown presence that still lingers. You know, I've always loved winter hiking. There's something about the stillness, the crunch of fresh snow under your boots, the way the world feels like it's holding its breath. But I'll be honest, after what happened last February, I don't think I'll ever step foot in the backcountry again. It started out like any other trip. I'd been planning this for weeks, a solo hike up near Mount Sheridan. The forecast said a storm was rolling in, but I packed enough gear to handle it. Extra layers, plenty of food, my trusty GPS. I'd done this a dozen times before, so I wasn't worried. If anything, the storm just made it more exciting. I liked the challenge. By the time I parked at the trailhead, the snow was already coming down hard. Big, fat flakes that turned the world white in minutes. I strapped on my pack, locked the car, and headed out. The first couple of hours were great. Quiet, peaceful, just me in the woods. I didn't see another soul, which wasn't unusual for that area, especially in winter. But then the wind picked up. Real fast, too. 1 minute it was calm. The next it was like being slapped in the face with ice. I pulled up my hood and kept going, but visibility was getting worse by the second. My GPS said I was still on track, but I couldn't see more than a few feet in front of me. That's when I started to think maybe I'd bitten off more than I could chew. About an hour later, I spotted it. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There, off the trail, was this snow shelter. Just a mound of snow with a small opening carved out, but it was unmistakably man-made. I've seen survival shelters before, and this one looked solid. I don't know if it was adrenaline or sheer relief, but I practically ran to it. Inside, it was cramped but warm enough to take the edge off the wind. Someone had left a couple of old sleeping bags and a half-empty water bottle. I remember thinking, lucky break. Someone's emergency stash. I figured I'd wait out the storm, then head back down in the morning. Seemed like a solid plan. But then I started noticing things. Weird things. The sleeping bags were damp, like someone had been using them recently, and there were scraps of food wrappers scattered around, all torn up like they'd been chewed on. At first I thought maybe it was an animal, but then I saw the scratches. They were on the walls of the shelter. Long, deep gouges in the hard-packed snow, like someone had been clawing at it. Not an animal, human hands. I tried to shake it off, maybe it was some desperate hiker trying to dig out, but there were too many scratches, too erratic. Like whoever made them had been panicking. I told myself to calm down. I wasn't the first person to use this shelter, and I wouldn't be the last. People leave weird stuff behind all the time. I unrolled my sleeping bag and tried to get some rest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I kept hearing noises. Not just the wind, but soft, scraping sounds like something was moving just outside the shelter. Around midnight, I decided to take a look. I grabbed my flashlight and poked my head out. Nothing. Just swirling snow and darkness. But as I was pulling back inside, my beam caught something. Tracks. Fresh tracks, leading away from the shelter. Human footprints, but barefoot. No shoes, no boots, just bare feet in the snow. I didn't sleep after that. I sat there with my flashlight and my knife, listening to the wind and trying not to freak out. By morning, the storm had eased up, but the tracks were still there, partially covered by new snow. They led up the hill toward a cluster of trees. I don't know why I followed them. Curiosity, maybe. Or stupidity. About 20 yards from the shelter, I found it. Another shelter, smaller, almost completely buried. I dug it out with my hands, and inside I found, God, I can still see it. Bones. Human bones. Scattered, broken, gnawed on. And a backpack, half frozen, with a name stitched into it. L. Turner. I scrambled back to the shelter, grabbed my gear, and started back down the trail. I didn't care about the storm anymore. I just wanted to get out of there. But the whole way down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I saw nothing, but I could feel it, like eyes on the back of my neck. By the time I made it back to my car, I was shaking so bad I could barely get the keys in the ignition. I drove straight to the ranger station and told them everything. They sent a team up to investigate, and a few days later, they found the shelters. They found the bones, and they found my tracks. But they didn't find me. That's the part that still keeps me up at night. When the rescuers came back, they showed me pictures of the site. My footprints, leading away from the second shelter. But in every photo, there was another set of prints right next to mine, barefoot, leading right behind me step for step.